Yeah, hi Sean. Thank you for speaking to the group today, and sorry for the delay. So while we left all to join, I just gave initial couple of minutes for everyone to join. So thank you for doing this talk today to our group, and thank you all for attending. We are also live on Twitch, so I will be monitoring the Twitch channel as well. So if we get any questions from there, I will just share it to you through Zoom chat. So with that said, it is all yours, Sean.
Okay, I'll try to not take too much time because I feel like everyone here has some level of experience with JavaScript, and my goal is really to just share what I've learned because I've been playing around with Svelte for a while. I'm running the Svelte Meetup here in New York together with Rich Harris, the creator of Svelte, and I've done some PRs. I've like is in Svelte, and I think it's definitely like one of the best things I've experienced. And I'm a full-time React guy. Like for work, I do React. This is all just for fun, but I think there's a saying in technology, like what you do for fun becomes the future of what you do for work. 5 to 10 years down the road. So I won't waste much time. I'm just gonna dive right in. I'll periodically check for questions, but feel free to just like open up the mic and just say something if you want me to explain a little bit more, or if you just have something you want to ask. I want to keep this pretty free flowing. All right, I'm going to share my screen. I hope everyone can see my screen. So you can see my screen, right? Awesome. So I'm going to put up my notes on my site, swix.io/speaking/how Svelte works. And I didn't have a better title. This is just what I gave Bhaskar. It's basically intro to Svelte, but I don't like calling things intro to Svelte. And these are all the links that we're going to go over. So yeah, you can find it later. But basically, so the way I approach Svelte is I want to always explain why, right? And the why is that I think we've hit this fundamental limit in JavaScript frameworks where we want to keep adding functionality, giving more functionality, but we keep bumping up against the limiting factor of size, right? Vue is 63 kilobytes, React is 114, Angular is 301. The way you do this, if you're not aware, if you click on the Bundlephobia link and you type in the main package. So for Angular, and this is not really the full result because there's some compilation going on. But I just wanted to give you the sense of like, there is some trade-off of weight versus functionality. And really, like, especially for React, we're bumping up against this for sure. And so Tom Dale actually made this observation in 2017. Tom's from the Ember community, but he actually said that compilers are the new frameworks, that we've basically hit the theoretical limit of what we can do with a single runtime. And if we are going to add more features, they're going to have to be compiled down via like optimizing compiler methods. And so essentially, the way I introduced Svelte is that Svelte is the first framework built from the ground up to have this as its underlying core philosophy, right? You're not going to put Svelte inside of a script tag in an HTML file and expect it to run with no build step. Like, we're just all in on build step. But given that we've committed the original sin of having a build step, let's actually just do the best we can with what we have. And so that's kind of how I approach this. Obviously, Svelte also has its pitch. So if you go to svelte.dev, these are the main sort of pitches that they write. I would say I can categorically say that this is true. So I've rewritten some of my apps from React to Svelte, and you do end up writing less code, mainly because and I'll quantify it for you. It's roughly about 20%. So not huge, right? I don't think you should throw out your old framework and adopt a new framework just because you're writing 20% less code. But I think that it is true that there's just less boilerplate to maintain. A lot of boilerplate comes from, for example, React's commitment to immutability, which means that you have to do things like use state and then like get the state and get the setter and then write the event handler and all this. It can get a lot of it can get kind of boilerplatey, and what Svelte does with that is actually invent sugar syntax to get rid of that. And I'll show you a little bit of what I mean by that. It also doesn't have any virtual DOM, so that actually eliminates a lot of the performance overhead. This is contentious because at some point it starts mattering, and that's the whole reason we adopted the virtual DOM in the first place. But the argument here is that actually for most of the apps that we do, meaning everyone who isn't Facebook.com, for the apps that we do, we actually probably don't need it. And sometimes the performance gains you can get are actually worth it. So this is very contentious. This one is also slightly contentious. Oh, okay, sorry, I accidentally. The reactivity part is also slightly contentious, but I like this a lot because it really brings the mutability factor of Svelte to bear. So the way I kind of explain it is that React is kind of like JavaScript's const, and Svelte is kind of JavaScript's let. Like React will just const everything and make everything immutable and force you to redeclare every single step of the way. And Svelte will just let you directly mutate the DOM elements on the browser. That's a little bit of a overgeneralization, but that's the rough philosophy, and I can go into a little bit of that later on. Anyway, so the main tools with Svelte, you can try this out, in like the typical format, just like follow the instructions and see a hello world come up. But the main tools I would show people is the tutorial, and this is kind of how. This is how I think everybody should experience Svelte. You can finish this whole thing in about 50 minutes. So this is the full tutorial, and you can really see some of the key features of Svelte. So for example, just to say hello world, this is as simple as it gets. You can't get any simpler. You're literally just writing HTML. The difference is like this is not HTML though, because it's actually being compiled into a JS output. And if you scroll through the JS output, there's actually a lot of code. It's a lot of code is generated. So, but it's actually, and it turns out to be the code that you would write if you were doing it yourself. So I think a lot of why we adopt frameworks is basically to have a good abstraction that writes the code that we would write anyway if we had no frameworks, right? Because people who talk about vanilla JS are always like, I don't need a framework, I can just write this myself. But really, you end up writing your own framework, and you might as well just have a well-tested one that's well-designed. So, Svelte has this sort of JS, parsing built in. So this Svelte component gets parsed to this JS, and this JS is the one that gets executed. It also does mean that it has very nice styling attached to it, and this is where it starts departing from Svelte, right? So here's the result of the paragraph, and I can just style P here, for example, like a P tag and like color pink, and yeah, that's not a nice pink, but you get the picture. Like you have scoped styles together with the component. This does not leak to its siblings or its parents or its children. It's literally scoped to this exact component. So let's look at the JS output. And again, because Svelte is a compiler at its core, you always want to see like this is the before and this is the after, right? So this JS output, you actually get to the P tag, you actually append a class with a specially compiled class name, and the class name is attached onto the CSS output as well. And so that's how Svelte achieves its scope styles. And this is actually something that embarrassingly I took way too long to discover. I think the lesson here is to not be afraid of looking at compiler output, especially when it's so readable. And if you look at all these functions, they're very simple functions as well. Okay, so let's talk a bit about direct mutability. I like to show that by talking about two-way binding. So I think in React, we're all very familiar with the paradigm. So I'm gonna fast forward to the answer. Actually, no. You know what? I'm just going to reset. So I think we're all very familiar in React with the paradigm of controlled and uncontrolled components, and the way that you want to, do a controlled component is, or just like set state in a component is, you have something like a, const like state, or like val. I just call this a val set val equals use state world, and then you have to write some stupid event handler like input value equals val, and then on change equals set val event e.target.value, something like that. if you've done a form in React, you've done this millions and millions of times. And we even have libraries to help us do this kind of thing at the form level, doing validation and all that. It's a lot of boilerplate. Like, I mean, most of the time, like, it's good if you want to write a custom change handler, but a lot of times you don't want to handle it at that logic. And I honestly, I think it's just a better way to get around it, which is just bind it. So if you do two-way binding, you just use the bind keyword, and now we're binding, you know, the state to that input, and that's what we're seeing on the screen here. This seems like a much simpler way to do things, and what this really is sugar syntax, right? Because under the hood, of course, we're still doing the value thing and we're still setting value thing, but why not let the compiler do that for us, and when we don't have to type it all the time? So I think that's very interesting. Svelte even has a very nice shortcut where if you have the exact same name in the variable as well as the value that is the thing that you're binding, you can just do something like this. I think this works. This will be very embarrassing if it's wrong, but it's wrong. What's the shortcut? Okay, there is a shortcut, but I don't remember it. Something like this. Okay. Anyway, there is a shortcut. I'm just brain farting right now. Hopefully, someone else can figure it out for me. But that's the rough idea. Okay, so there's really nice mutable ways to do forms. If then else, I don't have to show you that it's capable of everything that you expect a JavaScript framework to do. But I think when you compare it to React, like, I think what Rich Harris asserts is that basically a front-end framework isn't complete without a styling solution, right? Like, you probably want a styling solution, and React forces that decision on you by throwing 20 different styling solutions at you, and good luck. I think that's great for the long-term longevity of the project, and they don't have to decide, but it does contribute to some stress. And if we can get some optimizations by bundling it together, that's great. So another way that this actually happens is state management. So obviously React doesn't do any state management apart from context, but here we have stores. Where the hell are stores? And here we have different components which are drawing from a single store, and the store is literally like, this is the API that you write a writable store, and here is how you increment and decrement the store, right? You import the store, and then you say count.update or count.set, whatever you want. And these are all separate components that are all coordinated by this single individual store, which is very sort of mutable way to do things, and it just comes with the framework, which is so nice. What's great is also that if you don't use it, it doesn't get shipped, right? That's the whole compiler approach. But since if you don't use it, it doesn't get shipped. That actually opens up the pathway for us to just include a whole bunch of good defaults for you to use this. I also like the Svelte store because you could write this actually by yourself. So I have a talk that actually shows you how to write this from scratch for yourself. It's very easy. It's only like 20 lines of code. And what's very nice about stores is that you can actually take that intuition and take the writable store. So here's the writable store, and here I have a set of buttons that actually hard code and set values to a progress bar, right? But if I, for example, change this writable store and use the exact same API, and just tween and just buffer the values that are coming out of it. So let me show you what I mean. So I haven't really changed much code. I've just replaced the writable store with a tween store. And so now when I set the values, it actually nicely interpolates in between them. And this is the nice idea that a comprehensive front-end framework should have these solutions recommended to you up front. Because as a front-end user, you're going to be starting from like a basic thing, you're going to build up extra functionality, you're going to build up more functionality, and it should not be a giant refactor to keep changing these things, right? Like I can talk while I code and do this. Like, it's so dirt easy. And then it becomes more of like play, like you're playing with your code. You're looking at this and you're like, all right, maybe this doesn't look so right. Like maybe I should set some options and start tweaking the delay or the duration or the easing or the interpolation, right? Like, and they're all options. Svelte even has like custom easing functions that you can import. I won't go through with them, but I'm just saying this is part of the framework that you don't have to decide, right? In React, we have so many other options. So I'm not going to go through the rest of these, but they're all very, very good ideas that I think you should at least be aware of in terms of like the frameworks that you use and like what you choose to invest in, or just clone this for your own work. I don't know. I don't care. You can definitely clone the Svelte store idea for your own work without Svelte, and I think it's a very, very good idea. Okay. So that's the why Svelte. It's just a bunch of really good idea, and we also covered what is Svelte. I also have a talk about this. I do some talks on stuff, and here's a talk I did at the Svelte Society meetup, where we actually talked about how to write your own stores. So intro to Svelte stores, as well as some other talks that were done by very smart people. So you're welcome to check out this tweet on your own time, because it's a nice talk. Okay, so let's talk about why I'm a React guy. I do React at my day job. Why do I enjoy Svelte? And I actually did a blog post about this. This is actually, by the way, my blog also in Svelte. And I'm just gonna switch the colors a little bit here. Something nicer, maybe darker a little bit. You see how easy it is to write all this, and you can see all the code for this. I'm just directly mutating a store. Again, that's a store. That's a Svelte store. You can of course do that in React. It's just going to take a lot more code. The reasons I like Svelte are that it is batteries included, right? All the functionality like animation and styling. Here's a list of everything in Svelte that's first party versus everything in React that you have to go and decide what to use by yourself. So for example, transitions, you might have to find React transition group. Maybe React transition group isn't right. You have to use RTG+. I've gone through the exact same scenario. Animation has React Spring or Framer Motion. Svelte hid management, like for your metadata, like OG image, OG whatever tags. You have to use either React Helmet or React Async Helmet, and good luck if you don't know the difference, and so on and so forth. Like there's a whole bunch of different issues, as well as to be fair to React, Svelte does not have some of these other things that React does have. And here I'm only talking about first party because the community has filled in both holes, right? It's just like how much decision fatigue do you need to just get basic stuff done. There's also in terms of like why I enjoy Svelte, it's mutability, right? Instead of like use state and then like just like setting immutable factors, like you're actually just directly mutating like I plus equals 1 to bump a number instead of like scheduling an update, and hopefully it's like asynchronous and all that. And really like the mental model of direct mutability, especially for forms like the ones I showed, the input two-way binding forms I showed you, is really awesome. So that's a little bit leaking into two-way binding. So that's the sugar syntax, right? Here's the React equivalent, and here's the Svelte equivalent. Obviously, a lot less code. And there's just so many examples. It's kind of not fair to show you so many examples just because one is a compiler and one is not. So obviously you have to write more code in the other ones. I really like stores. Check them out, even if you don't use Svelte. They have really good docs. So for example, I was trying to write this demo. So let me show you this demo. Okay, so this is Svelte Zen Garden. And what it is like this like Zen editor, right? And I wanted to implement this like drag and drop interface, right? Like I wanted to say like this element I want to drag around, and oh, by the way, let's just show it off, right? Because like it's so cool. Body background color red. I don't know. Does this work? No, because I think let's say font size 18 pixels. Yeah, okay, fine. 20 pixels, 30 pixels. So like it's a lot. It's very nicely mutating, and it's very nice to just bind things side by side. But basically, anyway, long story short, I was looking for how to implement like a drag and drop thing like this with Svelte, and just kind of searching through the Svelte docs, I actually found Svelte actions, which were exactly what I needed, right? So if I go through the Svelte docs. Actually, it's an example. So there's a really good set of examples that you can use. I'll just find you exactly what I want, which is this example. And here's a nice drag and drop interface, and it's all contained within this single action, which I basically just copied and pasted and used. So the docs are just really well organized, and I think that's really helpful for someone who's just picking it up and having fun and learning with it, right? These are all real examples from Rich Harris's time at, implementing this kind of thing in the New York Times. So that's very helpful. Okay, so I think I'm done. I think I finished the why I enjoy Svelte thing. Oh, simple internals. So basically, if you've ever looked into the source code of React, you would never come out. But Svelte's source code is actually very simple, and you could actually understand it and fork it and edit it and PR it if you want as well. I have a blog post on sending in a PR to Svelte as well if you want to do that. It's also got less baggage, and also because it's just fun to play with. So yeah, that's about it. In terms of like overall like just fun, I think that's how I approach this now. Obviously there's not much of a job market yet, but there is a growing job market, and I think it's just more like I think people should who use frameworks should expand their minds on like what frameworks can possibly do for you, because you might have some limiting beliefs that are not actually true. Okay, so then on to Sapir. What is Sapir? So Sapir does everything that Svelte doesn't do. So Sapir is kind of like the meta framework around Svelte, just like Next.js is for React and Nuxt.js is for Vue. So it does the server-side rendering, right? Like this is for SEO and speed. Basically anything production need that requires that level of performance. So Sapir, you can see the docs over here, very much the same style as Svelte's docs. And I typically just point people to the real world implementation of Sapir. And so this is how you're supposed to do authentication, routing, server-side rendering, all that like production-y stuff. So this is like a medium clone in Svelte.js. I don't know if it's like a medium clone or it's just like a simple like basic CRUD thing, right? So you can do logins and you can do routing. We've got some routes over here. All that basic stuff, completely open source. It's a working demo. Take that and use it. So it also does static site generation, and that's something that I work at Netlify. I'm very keen on. So my own site as well uses Sapir. It actually uses a Sapir overlay, and I think I can actually static. Yeah, so I can actually talk about my experience. So Gatsby is the de facto static site generator for React. I used to use Gatsby for my site. It used to ship 138 kilobytes of JavaScript. When I rewrote my own site to Svelte, it went down to 9 kilobytes of JavaScript, and that's only for the interactive parts like this stuff and the client-side navigation. So very, very tiny. It looks much better in terms of Lighthouse scores. And so on and so forth. There are a bunch of other trade-offs. For example, it's a lot less mature and doesn't have a professional full-time team dedicated to maintaining it. So these are things that you might want to consider. But open source is open source. That's how things are, and it only gets better if you choose to contribute. And if you just want to sit back and wait for other people, then you're just gonna have to accept whatever exists today. Okay, so that's Sapir. I can talk a lot more about this, but I don't want to bog you too much down. I just want to leave you with inspiration. Okay, so here's a presentation from a good friend and very, very active Svelte member, Johan, I think over in Belgium, and he does this talk about what you can do with Svelte. I'm just going to give his talk for him. And so basically, where are people using Svelte, right? Like, it's where it's like embedded devices that don't have the resources of like laptops and first world smartphones. It gets to because the JavaScript output is so small, but it's still so easy to write. People can write really interactive stuff with JavaScript, and that's fantastic. It's a way smaller bundle size. Typically, again, here's another production Svelte app that's at 9 kilobytes, which is awesome. You are not Facebook. Like, you probably don't need all of React. Okay, so Here's a nice demo. Oh my God, this is a fantastic demo. Let me just see if I can pull this for you. I cannot pull this for you. Go check this out. Wait, let me. Here it is. Yeah, this is in Svelte, which is insane. The that you know, you can have, obviously a lot of this stuff you can write with like WebGL, and you know, there are other technologies that can do the same thing. But here we're tracking every satellite on Earth. It's still loading the data, I believe, so it's not showing up yet. My internet seems to be slower while I'm streaming this video. I believe we still have time. Okay. Well, there's supposed to be you know, like a million dots representing all the satellites surrounding Earth, and then you can click on them and select them. Am I ad blocking? I hope I'm not. Okay. Anyway, just trust me on this. That my my machine is dying. Okay. Oh, there it is. Yeah. So these are all individual downloads, and you can click on them and interact with them, and you know, and just see what's going on with the world of satellites. And these are all just rendered with Svelte, and I think probably the bulk of the time was just data download. So it's just like really performant, and there's a lot of these stuff that the stuff that you can't do with Svelte, with other frameworks. Okay, so what else? MMORPG. Someone's building this. Not the 3D stuff, but just the UI on top of it. And again, it's because it's so enjoyable to write that you would choose something like this. So very, very cool. There's a material UI port. There's a poker game that people are making. There's just like stuff, you know. It's a framework. You can use it to do whatever you want. Here's some of Johans' own projects. These are all very, very cool and very professional. I think he writes very high quality stuff. I should also probably, like, this is the first instance of Svelte being used in the New York Times. So this is Svelte as well. And again, like, you know, what am I showing you by showing you this? Not very much, because you know, this is a lot of down to design, right? But for the New York Times, you can imagine that performance matters, because page loads, you know, are views, right, and subscribers and all that. So yeah, I mean, that's the whole reason Svelte was invented, was because of the New York Times. What else do I have for you? I want to give you more inspiration. Okay, Svelte jobs. So there's this dedicated account. I don't know who it is, but they're doing a good job of like curating the jobs that are coming out in Svelte, and people specifically, you know, using it in production. The most fun one is, the most interesting one is Apple is actually hiring their second consultant for this job, for whatever they're working on in Apple. We don't know, because Apple's very secretive what they're doing, but this is good. Like, you know, big names that people have heard of using Svelte. I think that gets people interested. Well, obviously, it doesn't matter who else is using it. It just matters, like, is it a good fit for you? So it just helps to give you that some assurance that yes, people who are smart use this. Okay, and then the last thing is my thing. So Svelte Society is this global network of meetups. We are based in New York. We have a Stockholm chapter, and other chapters are coming up as well. We do, if you want to start one in your own city, get in touch with me. I will help you out with like marketing and stuff like that. But it just like helps to, you know, show people what people are building with Svelte. Like there is a community. It is being used in production, and you can do, you know, whatever you want, and it's fun, fast, and easy to use. So yeah, I think that's you know, kind of my whole talk. I don't have much else, but I'm ready for questions.
So you mentioned that you wrote a blog post on contributing to Svelte, sending PRs to Svelte. Could you talk a little more about that?
Sure. So I've been on this streak of like doing a blog post a day. So I just like I need something to write about. So you know, I've done PRs to React, and I just did a PR to Svelte. So I just thought I'd just write it down. So here's a generalized how to contribute to open source frameworks. And then you know, I just kind of walked through and showed my Svelte contribution. Let me see. I think this was closed. Yeah, did you have any specific questions? But these are the steps that you can follow.
And mainly, how do you go about finding a good first issue? Something that like
yeah,
you can tackle, something that will get merged if you do tackle it.
Yeah, I mean, so this is the PR that I merged. I mean that I contributed. It's a good indication if the maintainer, one of the, so there are a few core maintainers, I think like 5 of them. If they open the issue, they're welcoming it to to be done, right? So look for PRs that have maintainer support like that. Sometimes people open issues and it's like a drive-by thing and it's probably not welcome, right? So you don't want to contribute those. So it's very good to work on issues that you personally are affected by. So I personally was affected by this, right? I ran into this issue, I filed an issue, then they were like, no, like this is wrong. So I was like, how about write a dev time warning? So if you personally are affected by it, then you care about it more than you're just working on some random shit that nobody cares about. And then obviously, sometimes the maintainers will mark something as good first issue, right? So you might want to filter for a good first issue. I don't know if these guys do that. It's not very active in Svelte, but in React, for example, we definitely have github.com, Facebook, React. They definitely groom the good first issue, and they block it off for experienced contributors. Like it's explicitly for first timers only. So label good first issue. And they'll even say like things are taken. So if you, so these are some good issues to take. Try to do that. For Svelte particularly, I think it's just a lot easier to contribute to Svelte than to React, just because the code base is a lot easier to read. And honestly, like you should probably understand the code bases of the things that you use, because someday it's going to bite you in the ass. and I've personally really enjoyed reading the Svelte code base. For Svelte in particular, we actually leave a lot of to-dos. So if you want to just pick up the to-dos, oh shit. Okay. I think I have to filter this. Hang on. Advanced search. I think I have to say something like source. Yeah. See. So something that a friend of mine, Lee Hao, did was literally go to the code base and look for to-dos that he could pick up. Does that make sense? Oh, I think he dropped. No, I think that's the thing. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I see you're still tuned in there. But yeah, I mean, if this is literally the maintainers asking for help. So they're just like, I don't want to deal with this right now. So these are to-dos. Cool. Awesome. One more question.
I was wondering if you could pick out maybe a small source and walk us through just to get a bigger flavor for what the syntax looks like.
For Svelte internal code or Svelte app code?
App code.
Oh, app code. Yeah. I mean, like I could talk about my own page.
Sure. Just something that's not just the small example code.
Yeah. Happy to. So here's my site. It's got routes. It's got components. This is a Sapir site, right? So there's some Sapir conventions that are here. For example, like the underscore layout stuff and underscore error. But the index page, for example, this is so here's the code for 6.io. This is the index page, right? So it's got a nav bar. It's got a main hero thing. It's got a client-side fetch of web mentions, and it's got a footer. So over here, I have index.svelte. Let me actually just do side by side. So over here, this is all the client-side execution stuff, right? So here, for example, I'm using a lifecycle method on mounts. So on mounts, it gets the mentions. It just like where do I define get mentions? Which it just fetches an external URL, and once it fetches that URL, it sets it. So here's mentions, right? So I declared mentions to be an empty array at initialization, and then once the component mounts, I'm going to go fetch it, and I just directly assign the array, right? And that causes a re-render. So all the way down here with mentions. I hope this is what you want, but with each mention, and so this is equivalent to React's like array.map whatever, right? Same thing, just some extra syntax, and then just like conditionally render some stuff. So this you're familiar with. It maybe the template syntax looks slightly different, but it's not going to be massively different. And honestly, so one thing I like about this, so in React, sometimes you get these like monster things. Like, so the pitch of React is that it's just JavaScript, which means that, you know, you can flexibly inside of JSX put in whatever you like. I think that's probably misused a lot because it gets you really complex JSX that gets really hard to read. When you use a templating language, you're forced to do things like, okay, I cannot express this as an expression like this. Like here, this is about as complex as you can get inside of a templating language. If you want to get any more complex than that, you have to push it all the way up into some centralized JavaScript source code. So here I'm doing some post-processing, for example. That makes sense. You could do this in React as well. You can have a JavaScript-y thing at the top, like, you know, computing all your data, and then at the bottom you only show your, you show your JSX. But here, this just imposes a little bit more discipline, which is nice for readability, but it's actually critical for SSR. So server-side rendering, you need the speed, right, to actually just, you know, go through all the initial renders. And it actually turns out to be very fast to just concatenate strings together for templating, rather than processing and executing JavaScript for React. So it turns out the SSR in Svelte is a lot faster than in React, which is a nice surprise. Okay, so, and then real code. Here is all the specific styles. Notice I directly style H1. I don't care because it's not gonna leak. These are all scope styles. So it's great because like, I know I'm on this page. I just wanna deal with this H1. I wanna do some like text lining or whatever. I'm sure this is terrible CSS because it's my own site. I don't care. But I'm just saying, like, in real code, this is like encapsulation. Like this is a HTML file, right? Like this is a Svelte file over here, but this is basically an HTML file. I got a script tag, right? I got a style tag, right? And then I got all my other stuff. This Svelte head, for example, dictates what's said over here. So yeah, you can see a lot of this kind of code. I can also show you the little store that I wrote for my theme. So here's the theme header, right? So here, what does this do? It has a light mode, right? It has a dark mode, and it has a custom theme mode where it lets you do things like change the color around, and it persists to local storage, right? So you know, not a crazy thing to do, but I just want to show you like that it just persists to local storage, and then when you reload it, it loads back the exact same thing. So I just want to show you like the amount of code that it takes to implement that. This is theme.js, it's 39 lines of code. I have my default theme, and then this is a custom Svelte store, which is basically implementing the Writable Store interface. That's the store that I showed you just now. So it kind of just like hooks into the reactivity model and has a pub subsystem, and you can subscribe to it, for example, for doing things like, you know, setting things or getting from the local storage. So let's actually check out how to use it. I think I use it in 2 places. So in one, okay. I think I use it in components theme editor. So here's the theme editor. I use a nice animation from Svelte. Again, that's this thing. And that's the mobile. Yeah. So yeah. So that comes from Svelte itself, and you can choose a number of inbuilt Svelte animations. I have the themes that I preset, and then here's the nice little theme editor. That's it. That's the theme editing. All the complex, like, you know, customization of stuff. This will definitely take more code in React, right? So hopefully that gives you a little insight into how you build applications. I mean, this is not an app, right? This is more of a site. So the more appy your app looks, the more code it's going to be. But it's actually fairly simple to write a mutable implementation like that, because you know, I'm just doing two-way binding of everything directly to my store, and from the store I'm subscribing to actually paint onto the screen all the colors that you set. There really isn't all that much to it. So I mean, I like this for anything involving user input, which is everything. Tad, does that help?
Yes, that was good. Thanks.
Yeah, I would also recommend file system routing. So here, you know, /data, and then oh, sorry, that's my data, and then speaking, and so there's an index page and there's a details page. This is more Sapir type stuff, but that's how I do the speaking index over here. Is my stuff, and then for details page, it fetches the data. So these are all client side navigations, right? I'm not fetching incremental data. So let me show you here. So when I navigate, I'm only fetching, some JSON. That's about it. There's no HTML load. So yeah, pretty cool. Awesome. Yeah, I'm available. You know how to find me on Twitter, GitHub, whatever. But thank you so much for the opportunity to share with you. I think it's fun. I hope you do something with it. Yeah, I'll stick around for questions, but otherwise, thanks for coming.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
So I have one question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So for React, we have React Native, right? So for Svelte, is there a similar mobile counterpart?
Yeah, there's Svelte native, but it's not first party. So it's being worked on by some some group of community members. I've never tried it.
Okay.
I would say it's a lot less mature than React Native, of course. And I would not, if I were to try to make a, JS enabled app, I would use React Native.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In fact, the way I pitch things is that anything that is more like a site, use Svelte. Anything that's more like an app, use React. Because the more like an app it is, the more likely you're gonna want a native version of your app on Android and iOS. Whereas if it's more like a site, it's meant to be served in browsers and fast and just doesn't have that much runtime functionality, doesn't rely that much on the third-party ecosystem, then use Svelte. Why not? It's much lighter, and it has built in all the opinions that you probably already need and want.
Yep. So do we have any other questions?
Hiya, yeah, one question actually. Sean, you spoke very well about what Svelte does very well. What do you hope to be kind of improved in Svelte in the future? Where do you want it to go?
Absolutely. I actually have that's at the bottom of my my post on why I like Svelte is why I don't like Svelte. So I think I'm a strong believer in honesty in advertising, and I think that we've been lied to enough as programmers that I don't want to contribute to that. So Svelte is a side project of at most 5 people, right? Like there's a ridiculously productive guy at the New York Times. There's a good core of maintainers, but it's nobody's job to work on Svelte. Whereas Vue, Angular, and React all have core teams that are paid full-time on this, and they're the top engineers in their field. So in order to get to the next level, there has to be a step change in terms of like governance, right? Like framework governance. It's boring stuff. Like on the code level, I'm 100% confident recommending it, right? Like the code works, the code's been tested, and it's brilliant code. It's fantastic code. The question is like, that's not all the framework is. The framework is also maintaining like edge cases after edge cases, not to like the end of time. So it just has to be really good, really well maintained. And now it's in that stage of like, it's just growing in terms of adoption and maintainers, and like either you wait for it or you could join in. I'm on the sidelines. I'm helping to grow the community, because I think at some point as well, you can scale codes only so much, but then you also have to just scale the community, the third-party ecosystem, the tutorials. Cheng Lu from the React team, he's OG React team, but he calls this the meta language around the language, right? The tutorials, the demos, the jobs, everything that needs to grow around the framework. Hopefully that answers your question a little bit. And you can check out my blog post. Like I listed out the pros and cons quite a bit. So there's a whole long list of stuff that React has that Svelte doesn't.
Super, thank you.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I know. I feel weird about this because like it's a fun hobby side thing for me now, but like who knows? Like it could be my whole thing 5 years from now, and it could be something that you enjoy. I think what matters is, do you enjoy using it on things? And If you find that, then first you enjoy it, then you're productive with it, then you're like, why actually do I need anything else apart from it's currently the the thing that's in vogue right now. But frameworks do evolve and change. And yeah, I think it's a very valuable tool to have in your toolkit.
So I have one question on Twitch. Like they ask, so apart from the blog, do you know any sites or websites that use Svelte in production?
Yeah, well, New York Times is obviously your #1 source, right? Anything with a detailed graphic on New York Times, interactive graphic is it's going to be built by Svelte. And then there's a lot of community stuff that's going on. So I can screen share again. So unfortunately, like I haven't done the dirty work of like going through and curating all these. So we just have it inside. So this is the Svelte community site that we're building. It's not production yet, but I'll just show you like the list of people that have said they're using Svelte. Right, a lot of this is like going to be like internal tools. It's going to be we just haven't like detected. So like these are just people who have volunteered and said yes, we are using Svelte inside our code base somewhere. So 1Password, chess.com, Data DBnomics. It's a long list, right? And Rakuten is a huge Japanese company. And the Japanese really care about performance. So yeah, I mean, look, like if you need, do you need a list of 100 companies? Do you need like big logos? Do you need small logos? I don't know. Like for me, it's usable enough that I can use it on most projects. It's gonna be up to you what you're convinced by. But here's what we have right now in terms of people who have gone to the stage of sending in a PR saying that they use it. And thanks for the question.
Yep.
One more question. Have you run into any roadblocks using Sapir in your projects?
Yes.
Yeah.
To the point of forking Sapir. So,
yeah.
so I'll talk about this. I didn't want to put this in my intro because it's not a very introductory thing. So Sapir is modeled after React's Next.js, right? Next.js is a framework that does a lot of things, but primarily it was meant to be hosted on Now v1 server-side rendering with a running server that when you fetch data, when someone visits your site, it would then fetch the data for that route and serve the data, right? On a per request basis, which means that you can have any number of dynamic routes and then you can just serve whatever is being requested. So this is good for traditional SSR, but when it comes to static site generation, which means pre-generating every single route, every possible combination and permutation of routes, do you want to be fetching that data every single time, one by one, right? So that's very slow, and there's also some race conditions that were accidentally left inside of Sapir, and we ran into all of these when we were doing that. So here, there's a 50,000 page site that was done by Neil Alpert. Author Neil Alpert. Actually, yeah. So here these are some of the PRs that we're sort of working on and getting accepted. That fix some of the production issues with Sapir for static site generation. So I actually went as far as forking Sapir. So here is SSG.js Sapir, and this is a fork of Sapir. Oh, whoa. 06 Sapir. So this is a fork of Sapir, and that includes all the other PRs that we felt we needed in order to get this going. And I think you'll find this pretty common in sort of early stage frameworks like this, that we're still not agreed on the direction. And in fact, I may be going so far as to drop Sapir. I'm still using Svelte, but I'm going to be writing my own version just because I just don't agree with the architecture. So that's really in the weeds, right? And so that eventually is going to end up as SSG, which is Svelte Site Generator, and this is my project that my site actually ends up using. And so this is more like a Gatsby equivalent for Svelte. You do the data fetch once, and then you spread it out among all the routes, and you do them in parallel, so it's a lot faster. And you also do incremental builds. So long story short, there are some issues with using Sapir. I would say Svelte is a lot more polished than Sapir is, but you know, it just needs people and love. What's great, I mean, the great thing is that it's just understandable human code. Like if you read React code, that's not understandable human code, but Sapir code is. Like it's just, you know, here's like the core CLI of Sapir, and it's just normal CLI Node.js stuff. Yeah.
Sure. So any other questions?
Yeah, just go play around with it. I highly recommend the repo, svelte.dev. So go through the tutorial, go through examples. I think the examples are really good for opening your mind as to, like, you know, what Svelte code looks like and demonstrating the features of Svelte. Yeah, so go check it out. I like this animation one. Where's the animation? The animation ones are always the most fun. There we go. What's this? Oh yeah, here's like some nice popping and locking. Yeah, that's it.
Yep. Cool. Thanks, Sean. Thanks for speaking to us and going over the overview and your experience with Svelte till now, and sharing everything about Svelte ecosystem. Thank you everyone for attending, and until next meetup, feel free to subscribe to our events, and thank you all for joining.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks guys for organizing this.
Thank you.
Thanks.